The stench of my daughter's charred teddy bear still clung to my robes when Constance Whitmore strutted into my courtroom like royalty. That same deranged grin was plastered across her face, the one she wore while bleaching my late wife's rose garden to death while siphoning $89,000 from our neighbors, and likely the one she had as she watched my house, the last remnants of my family, burn to cinders. But she made one devastating mistake. She never bothered to learn who she was provoking. I'm not some widowed dad she could terrorize into silence. My name is Judge Thaddeus Morrison, and she just committed arson against the one man in this district legally equipped to obliterate her entire existence. 18 months of psychological warfare. One perfect moment of reckoning. She believed torching my home would end me. Instead, she delivered the torch I'll use to expose and destroy her twisted little empire. So tell me, if you held this power, how would you use it? Comment your retribution below. But let me rewind so you understand how a once-beloved federal prosecutor became the man who brought a neighborhood tyrant to her knees. 2 years ago, life was nearly perfect. I'm Thaddeus, Thad to friends. 15 years putting away cartel kings and crooked senators. My 12-year-old daughter, Zara, and I lived peacefully in Willowbrook Heights, a quiet haven where the wildest scandal was Mrs. Lucy's cat hoarding newspapers. The house? Modest. Weathered blue siding, white trim my wife, Sarah, painted while pregnant. But it was sacred. Sarah's favorite mug still made morning coffee taste like ritual. Zara's laughter still bounced from the tire swing I'd hung our first day there. Even 3 years after cancer stole Sarah, that house breathed her memory through every creaking board. I was the neighborhood's dependable man. Immaculate lawn. Sunday grocery runs for Mrs. Lucy, her papery hands reminding me of my grandmother's. Coaching Zara's Little League, the crack of the bat my weekend prayer. Willowbrook Heights was the American dream in miniature. Young families, old-timers who'd witnessed Reagan, single parents craving stability, backyard grills smoking past midnight, kids discovering vegetables actually grow in dirt. A place where people quietly left groceries on porches and pretended not to know who gave them. Then the devil bought property next door. Constance Whitmore arrived 18 months ago in a white Escalade that screamed insecurity disguised as wealth. Designer everything. Hair priced like rent. Eyes like a predator, void and calculating. Her husband worked overseas, drowning in oil money, leaving her endless hours to dismantle lives. Within 3 days, she crowned herself HOA Compliance Coordinator, a title as fictional as her empathy. Yes, technically there was an HOA founded in 1987, abandoned before the Clinton administration. Nobody wanted it back. We believed in 3 rules: live and let live, help when needed, and mind your own business. But Constance smelled power vacuum like a vulture smells rot. She patrolled with a clipboard, vanilla stench trailing her wake, photographing lawns, interrogating homeowners about property values. The click of her heels became an omen. Her first target? My mailbox. Cast iron, hand-painted numbers, done by Sarah during her nesting phase. 15 Michigan winters gave it soul, rust, chipped paint, and memory. She labeled it non-compliant and demanded replacement within 48 hours or face $50 a day fines. Wrong move. I'm a federal prosecutor. I detect fraud like blood in water. A quick search confirmed the truth. The HOA had 0 legal authority. Better yet, federal employees are protected by Title 42 from housing harassment. Her fines weren't just bogus, they were a civil rights violation. I responded with a courteous legal letter detailing precisely where she could file her imaginary penalties. That should have ended it. Instead, it detonated war. 72 hours later, at 6 a.m., I woke to sprinklers blasting. Strange. I'd winterized them. Outside, robes still on, breath fogging, I found her in Sarah's rose garden. Spray bottle in hand, systematically omitting every bush my wife planted. Morning, Thad, she chimed, as if she weren't committing floral homicide. Just handling your pest problem. The burn of chemicals hit my nose. I saw the bottle. Industrial herbicide, tree killer strength. Those roses weren't plants. They were Sarah's heartbeat, whispered to through winters, pruned with her grandmother's shears. Before she died, she made me swear to keep them alive. There's no bee problem, I said, voice shaking. Oh, but there is, she crooned. Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter is allergic. One sting, poof, pure fabrication. Mrs. Peterson was 87, childless except for her teacup poodle. Truth was irrelevant to a sociopath drunk on counterfeit power. Leave, or I'm calling police. She laughed like snapping glass. I am the authority here. She finished the execution, packed her toxic arsenal, and sauntered away like she delivered brownies to a bake sale. That night, I watched the roses blacken under moonlight, and I made my first move. The next day, I called in sick and installed a fortress, cameras, motion sensors, night vision, cloud backups. Because predators always escalate, and the law protects homeowners recording crimes committed on their property. She didn't disappoint. 3 nights later, at 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion alert. There she was, dressed in black, suburban assassin, bleach in one hand, forged violation notices in the other. The footage caught everything. Her dumping chemicals on roofs. Her tucking counterfeit HOA threats under rocks. Her masterpiece forgeries, complete with fake signatures and fabricated meeting minutes, claiming unanimous votes for emergency enforcement. And her fatal flaw? She forged Mrs. Lucy's name. Mrs. Lucy, hands too warped by arthritis to write anything but a shaky Lucy. Mrs. Lucy, who'd warned me for months that the blonde harpy radiated wickedness. I had it all: video, motive, documents. Trespassing. Destruction of property. Fraud. Forgery. A prosecutor's dream. So I marched into the precinct, evidence in hand, and placed it before Sergeant Rick Bellows. He pushed it back like it was diseased. Mr. Morrison. Mrs. Whitmore is a pillar of the community. You sure you're not just having adjustment problems since your wife died? The coppery tang of rage filled my mouth. Adjustment problems? Grief makes people imagine threats, she sneered. Maybe you should see a counselor instead of harassing decent folks with conspiracy theories. That's when the awful truth snapped into place. Constance hadn't only targeted my roses, she poisoned the whole system against me. 3 weeks after she murdered Sarah's garden, Constance escalated to a direct attack on my family. My sister Rebecca had driven 12 hours from Portland for Zara's birthday, their first visit since Sarah's funeral 3 years earlier. Her battered Honda was ugly but reliable, and it meant Zara would hear the stories about Mom's college hijinks. We stayed up assembling Zara's bike until midnight, the smell of machine oil mixing with Rebecca's lavender, while Zara laughed until she couldn't breathe. Rebecca parked in my driveway like every guest had for years. At 6:15 a.m., pounding at the door woke me, and Zara screamed that a truck was stealing Aunt Becca's car. I stumbled outside, barefoot and disoriented, to see a heavy flatbed winching Rebecca's Civic. The driver, huge, indifferent, barely looked up. Vehicle violation. No overnight guest parking, he said, shoving a grease-stained receipt at me. $9,350 to retrieve the car. Cash only. When I demanded who authorized this, Constance emerged from behind the tow truck, immaculate in designer athleisure, clipboard in hand. Morning, Thad, she trilled. Community standards changed Friday, hand-delivered notices and all. She produced a glossy flyer, professionally printed with fake seals and bogus rules declaring overnight vehicles removable. The preposterous rationale: Rebecca's dent made the Civic a commercial vehicle. She spoke with that smug, clinical patience sociopaths use on their victims. Extended guest parking harms property values and safety. As the tow truck prepared to haul my sister away, I spotted the company name, Bellows Recovery Services. A cold recognition hit me, Bellows, like Sergeant Rick Bellows, who'd ignore my evidence. By the time I could react, Constance had melted back into her lair. Rebecca spent $80 on rides to reclaim her car from some sketchy lot while I turned my prosecutor instincts on the county clerk's records. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Willowbrook Heights HOA was a ghost, formed in 1987 but never properly incorporated, and someone had been weaponizing that vacuum. County complaint files showed 47 formal violations in 18 months, nearly all signed by Constance. The targets were telling: single parents, elderly residents, minorities, people unlikely to fight back. Cross-checking property records and business filings revealed the final ugly link. Bellows' recovery wasn't Sergeant Rick's. It belonged to his brother Richard, a felon with fraud convictions and a suspended towing license. The pattern was a perfect triangle. Constance manufactured fake HOA authority and identified vulnerable targets. Rick, as police, minimized complaints. Richard ran the illegal towing racket. Suburban extortion disguised as neighborhood governance, likely pulling in thousands. But I needed evidence that would hold up more than motive and pattern. That evening I found Zara on her bedroom floor, carefully taping a photograph back together. An image of Sarah teaching 3-year-old Zara to ride a tricycle, rescued from Rebecca's glove compartment and shattered by rough handling during the towing. Watching my daughter reconstruct that memory, tears on her face, something cold and fierce settled in me. These people weren't just stealing money, they were tearing apart the last pieces of our life. 2 weeks after Rebecca's car was taken, Constance crossed the final, monstrous line. She terrorized my child directly. I was in federal court prosecuting a wire fraud defendant when my phone erupted, dozens of frantic calls from Zara's school. Mr. Morrison, Zara's panic attacking. She says men with cameras forced their way into the house. I abandoned my case mid-closing and drove like a man possessed. At the school nurse's office, Zara was pale and shaking, clutching her inhaler. She told me 2 men had come claiming to conduct an inspection. When she asked for ID, they brushed her off and told her little girls shouldn't question adults. They took pictures of the house, her room, our office, even the medicine cabinet. But arrogance leaves traces. A business card slid behind a couch named Morrison Property Assessments LLC, registered that same morning to a vacant lot. The inspector was Derek Whitmore, Constance's unemployed cousin, whose resume consisted mostly of DUIs and a meth arrest. That night, terrified and exhausted, I filed an emergency restraining order. With 18 months of documentation, the judge, Patricia Hernandez, who'd known Sarah, granted it immediately. Constance was ordered away from me, Zara, and our home for 6 months. Any violation meant automatic arrest and potential federal charges. I felt triumphant until the next morning. Through the front window, I watched Constance laughing with 2 officers like she was arranging a playdate. Then Sergeant Bellows approached me with a chilling claim. Mrs. Whitmore said I'd threatened her life. You told me you'd bury me, so deep even God couldn't find the body, she said in court-ready sobs. To add insult to injury, Bellows smugly informed me the judge had just signed a counter-restraining order filed by Constance 2 hours after mine. 2 mutually exclusive orders, both asserting the other as the aggressor, the legal equivalent of a bear trap that would stall the courts while Constance kept wrecking lives. But Constance had overplayed. Filing false reports against a federal prosecutor is a federal offense, 20 years on the line. I decided to escalate to the only force with the reach to dismantle this network. I called Marcus Webb, my old law school roommate and the FBI's top financial crimes investigator. Marcus listened, then dug deep. Within 48 hours, he called back with a financial autopsy. Constance was drowning. $89,000 in back taxes on a rental bought with forged documents. Her husband's glamorous overseas job was a lie. He worked in Nevada truck stop. The Escalade was nearly repoed, 17 maxed-out cards. Worse, she'd been collecting HOA assessments for 18 months, about $340,000, money that vanished because there was no legitimate HOA fund. Marcus spelled it out: mail fraud for the fake notices, wire fraud for electronic transfers, civil rights violations if she targeted victims based on race or family status. Federal charges, not petty neighborhood squabbles. The picture was clear. Constance used fake authority to extort neighbors and prop up a collapsing life. She'd grown greedy enough to cross into federal jurisdiction, and she'd been picking on a federal prosecutor. I couldn't move without airtight proof, surveillance, financial records, and victim statements, but Marcus promised the FBI would assemble a task force. Give me a week, he said. We'll take her down hard. That night, for the first time since Sarah died, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself: hope. Not just for justice, but for the methodical dismantling of people who prey on the vulnerable. The hunter would become the hunted, and I would savor watching it happen. The next morning, I began calling in every favor from 15 years of prosecutions. This wasn't vengeance. It was surgical justice. My first call was to Special Agent Rebecca Torres in the FBI's Economic Crimes Unit. I found Zara standing in Mrs. Lucy's front yard, her face streaked with tears and ash, watching everything we owned devoured by fire. When she saw me, she broke free from the blanket around her shoulders and ran straight into my arms. Daddy! She clung to me, sobbing so violently I could feel every tremor in her spine. She tried to speak through the panic. I got home from school, and it was already smoky. Mrs. Lucy made me stay with her and call 911. Beyond her, what remained of our home was a skeletal shell glowing with embers. Fire crews were still dousing hot spots, water pooling in blackened hollows where walls once stood. The smell was chemical wrong. Nothing about the fire felt accidental. Fire Marshal Davidson approached quietly, helmet in hand, eyes heavy with truth he hadn't yet spoken. It started in the basement. Traveled along accelerant trails. It spread fast, too fast for anything natural. We managed to stop it before the second floor. His voice trailed into a hollow silence. He knew what that floor held: Sarah's photographs, Zara's drawings, the last pieces of our life before grief. He straightened. Cause is undetermined, but this wasn't spontaneous. ATF has been notified. Given your position, Judge, we'll be treating this as possible domestic terrorism. Hours passed in shards. Investigators, flash cameras, the low murmur of neighbors gathering in clusters, whispering my name like it was part of the wreckage. Then an unmarked black SUV arrived. Agent Monica Rodriguez, ATF, stepped out with a team trained to read fire-like language. 2 hours later, she had already translated the crime. Someone used a timer. Industrial accelerant. Whoever did this planned it. She exchanged a look with her team before delivering the blow. We also recovered footage from your neighbor's doorbell camera. She held up a still image. 1:47 p.m., Derek Whitmore, entering my house with a duffel bag. She almost sounded stunned. He left fingerprints on the containers, dropped his driver's license in your basement, and bought the timers with his own credit card. He might be the most incompetent arsonist I've seen. By nightfall, Derek was in custody. He folded within minutes, shaking so hard his cuffs rattled. Constance said you were trying to destroy her, he babbled. She said if your house burned, you'd be too busy with insurance crap to keep coming after her. She promised me 10 grand from HOA funds. She said no one would be home. He thought this was property damage. He thought this was revenge. The FBI called it terrorism. Then came the recordings, wiretaps from an unrelated federal probe. Constance's voice, sharp with entitlement, sealed her fate. Start in the basement. He keeps all his legal files there. What if someone's inside? Then they burn. People who meddle pay the price. The room where agents played that audio went silent. Not even the machines hummed. By 11:30 p.m., federal vehicles surrounded her mansion. Neighbors watched from behind curtains and camera phones as Constance Whitmore, queen of manicure tyranny, was let out in shackles, still spitting out bylaws like they held jurisdiction over justice. She saw me across the street, standing beside Zara. Her face collapsed. 6 months later, federal court overflowed. Reporters, legal scholars, families she had tormented, all waiting. Headlines called it the trial of a suburban despot. Judge Patricia Hernandez presided, a woman carved from precedent and patience. Constance entered in an orange jumpsuit, wrists chained, eyes scanning for a single sympathetic face. There were none. The prosecution dismantled her carefully constructed empire of control, extortion, discrimination, financial fraud, conspiracy. Then the arson tapes played. Use enough accelerant to erase everything. Even if someone gets hurt, good. A juror covered her mouth. Someone in the gallery wept. Even her attorney lowered his eyes. Judge Hernandez leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, do you wish to address the court before sentencing? Her attorney begged her to remain silent. She stood anyway. I protected my neighborhood, she hissed. He thought being federal made him untouchable. Actions have consequences. It was not an apology. It was a confession. The verdict was inevitable. Life, without the possibility of parole, under federal terrorism statutes. She once ruled over cul-de-sacs with violation slips and threats. Now she would die behind concrete and steel, her kingdom reduced to a number on a jumpsuit. I did not feel triumph, only completion. Zara slipped her hand into mine. We didn't speak, because some victories are too costly to celebrate. Judge Hernandez's voice was calm, but her eyes carried the practiced precision of someone who has delivered justice her entire life. Measured, surgical, final. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, you have just confessed to federal terrorism while displaying not a flicker of remorse for nearly killing a child. Your actions terrorized families, stole their hard-earned money, and ended in an arson attack that could have taken innocent lives. The sentencing took less than 3 minutes. Constance Whitmore, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Derek Whitmore, due to cooperation, you will serve 8 years with supervised release. Both of you will pay full restitution, $473,000 to the families you harmed. Applause broke loose through the gallery like a dam finally breaching. Mrs. Lucy openly wept. Marcus Rodriguez kissed his wife's hand as tears ran down his face. 23 families, after 18 months of living under fear, watched the architect of their misery receive a punishment equal to her cruelty. As bailiffs moved to escort her away, Constance turned, searching the room for even a single sympathetic face. There were none. Instead, she found me standing beside Zara. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Justice stood between us like a wall she could never again cross. Her suburban empire had crumbled. A federal prisoner's number was all that remained of her authority. 2 years passed. Now, the scent of fresh coffee drifts through the kitchen of our rebuilt home, blending with the roses blooming beyond a window. Zara practices driving in the same driveway where our nightmare once began. This house rose from ashes, built with insurance funds, federal compensation, and donations from neighbors who finally found their courage. Her bedroom overlooks the memorial garden where Sarah's roses flourish again, surrounded by flowers donated by every family Constance once terrorized. Mrs. Lucy tends to it every morning, her weathered hands coaxing life from soil that once held nothing but fear. From the backyard comes the crack of Zara's baseball bat. She's training for varsity tryouts now, the sound of a girl who learned that victims do not stay broken. But our survival was only the first victory. Willowbrook Heights became something no one thought possible, a neighborhood that truly protects its own. 6 months after the trial, we formed a legitimate HOA with bylaws drafted by constitutional attorneys, designed so no tyrant could ever take root again. Young families now seek us out. Property values have risen 40%, not in spite of our story, but because of it. The $473,000 recovered from Constance's fraud rebuilt more than homes. It bought solar-lit streets, a playground where children's laughter rewrote old horrors, and community workshops where Mrs. Lucy teaches kids that tomatoes come from soil, not supermarkets. Most importantly, it launched the Willowbrook Heights Justice Fund, now helping families across the country fight HOA abuse. 87 communities and counting. Marcus Rodriguez, once silenced by fear, now leads our legal education program. He teaches the first law every homeowner should know: demand incorporation documents. If they can't prove lawful authority, they have none. The legal precedent from our case changed the nation. Constance's law now requires mandatory financial audits for every HOA and background checks for anyone seeking leadership. Federal policy dictates that harassment of federal employees triggers immediate FBI review. Law schools study our case as the model for prosecuting suburban corruption. Meanwhile, Constance serves year 3 of 15 at FCI Danbury, folding prison laundry for 23 cents an hour. Entitlement holds no value where she lives now. Reports say fellow inmates, especially mothers and abuse survivors, have given her an education she'll never forget. Derek works dishwashing in Oregon, sending monthly restitution until 2045. Sergeant Rick Bellows lost his pension and freedom, 2 years for corruption. Brother Richard's towing business was seized and sold, his trucks now serving real communities instead of preying on frightened homeowners. But the victory that truly mattered took place last month at our 3rd annual community festival. A crowd of 600 gathered, federal agents, reporters, out-of-state visitors seeking courage for their own battles. Zara, 16 now, her posture carrying Sarah's fire, stepped onto the stage to announce scholarship recipients. These awards, she said, voice steady and proud, go to kids whose families refuse to surrender to bullies. Because the best revenge against those who try to destroy you is building something beautiful where they left ashes. The festival raised $18,000 for next year's Justice Fund. But money wasn't the point. The real triumph lay in the faces of people who were no longer victims, but guardians. Tommy, Mrs. Lucy's grandson, the Marine veteran Constance once threatened with deportation, now leads our neighborhood watch, running it with discipline and compassion. At sunset, I stood in the garden, gold light on the roses, Sarah's memory alive in every bloom and laugh. Evil had tried to break us. We answered by building something eternal. We didn't just survive Constance Whitmore. We became the proof that tyranny can be defeated. So tell your story. Somewhere, someone needs to hear it. You are not alone. The fight for your neighborhood begins with one family who refuses to bow. Make sure that family is yours.